think of also rhythm as kind of like a straight line. We have a point A and we have a point B. When we're traveling, let's say you can kind of think of it as driving down the street or road or whatever. Let's say we're going this direction. The speed that we're going at, that's our kind of the tempo of the song. We want to maintain that speed throughout the song. So these 2 points here, point A and point B, could really be a lot of things. It could be a measure, it could be a whole section of a song like a verse. Doesn't matter how you slice and dice it, but for now what we're going to do is we're just going to look at this as just one beat. Or in our 4/4 time, it's going to be the duration of one quarter note. So it sounds like this, one, that's the duration of that line. So in a whole measure of 4/4, there would be 4 more segments of this line right here. So if I break this exactly in half, that would be, and let's say I put a little speed bump there and I'm driving through, I'd hear this click, click, and then the click here on B. What that is we've gone from this whole duration of a quarter note to breaking it in half into eighth notes. So now that, again, splitting that in half, we get 2 eighth notes. Now, I could break this down even further, and that's why I kind of like this linear way of looking at it. And we're going to have one other way, which I think is even going to be more helpful. But this linear way can help you kind of see what we're doing with these rhythms from the previous page. If I break it down again, split that one in half, then we get, let me kind of erase this here, since you know that that's a quarter note. But if I go like this, so if I break it in this chunk, we get 16th notes. Each one of these segments is a 16th note. And that would be 1 E and like that. And now my handwriting is not the best, so I was not an art major. All right, so that should all look the same. Now, if you probably were remembering from the previous page, we had the 16th that looked like this, a grouping of all connected. These are what we call beamed. So here's a little notation kind of idea here. Whoops, where am I at here? Brush. There we go. So in notation, hopefully you can see this, we have the head of the note and then we have the stem. Now, a note could be stemless, like we saw before. That would be a whole note. And without a stem and nothing filled in, that's a whole note. If it's a head with the nothing filled in with a stem on it, that's our half note. So there's a lot of variations here. Now, if we have, let's say, a head with the stem and one thing attached to it, which is what they call a flag, that becomes an eighth note, which is kind of what I drew up here. Now, eighth notes can also be connected together like this. There's no difference between this and this. Eighth notes by themselves, separate like that. It's just, think of kind of like it's breaking it apart in this example here. So don't get confused about that. And 16th notes have 2 things next to it. Hopefully you'll see them written much nicer than the way I'm drawing them here. Anyway, so there's a 16th note. Here's 2 16th notes together. That's no different than this right here. 2 of them beamed together, 2 lines beamed together. They should be connected, just like that. Here's 4 of them connected together like that. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. All right, let me kind of erase some of this stuff here. So this is kind of a linear way of thinking about music. And we can break this up in a lot of different ways. We could literally do, let's say, same line and break it up into 3 chunks. So you can start to see that there's a lot of ways we can slice and dice this sort of thing. So now let's take a look at another way. And this is a way that I kind of think about music, is in a circle, all right? So let's take a look at this first one here. So we have, and I'm going to draw a few things on this one. So again, circle it's kind of like the same concept of the line. So let's pretend that we're traveling around the circle in this direction. All right, we're going this direction here. And, oops, that's horrible, Chris. All right. So anyway, so we're going traveling around here. And then again, the speed that we're going around this circle is the tempo. Think of it also kind of like a racetrack. I use that analogy sometimes. So if we put a speed bump at the top here, every time we get around here would be our what we call our beat, or downbeat, which would be in a 4/4 time, would be like 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. So each time around is one beat. And these circles, again, can change. That could be a measure, it could be 2 beats, it doesn't matter. But for in this example, it's just going to be 1 beat. So if we get halfway around, would be, and if we put a speed bump down here, that would be where our eighth note would be. So the value of this whole half, whoops, not an 16 note, half value of that is an eighth note. This right here would be, I did it again, eighth note. So these are 2 halves, the eighth note. So again, if I got rid of this speed bump here, then that sound would be just a quarter note going click, click, click. Again, as soon as I put that little marker here, we get eighth notes, which would be click, 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 that kind of sound. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and just like that. All right, so over here, same concept, same idea. What we have here is, whoops, where's my, I lost my, there we go, 16th notes. This you can see it's broken into 4 equal parts, and we can see the count here, 1, E, and A. Now, in guitar terms, let's talk a little bit about how this relates to guitar. So if I go back to my eighth note, this would be a downstroke, and that's what that symbol means. The V is an upstroke. So that's one way of doing this. But if you can see how the eighth note overlays with this 16th note. Here would be our downbeat right here on 1, and this whole section here would be the eighth note if we didn't play the 16th note part over here. Whoops. Boy, Photoshop is really acting a little funny today. All right. So again, so that would be, you would assume that would be an upstroke at this point. But here's the problem. If I set up my upstroke as the ands like I did over here, and I wanted to use that for the 16th, it's going to be weird to play this one down and then have to play this one up and then this one up here, and it's just going to throw things off. So what we do is we play this one down, this one up, this one down, and this one up to keep it even, down, up, down, up, down. Now that makes this eighth note point here as a downstroke. So that may seem a little weird, but you can see why we're doing it that way. So sometimes I like to, what I'm pointing out here is sometimes I like to play eighth note over here as down up, but sometimes I like to play it as down down because it's going to set up our 16th note pattern on the right hand column, or this right circle over here. So just kind of be aware of that. And I also like the circular way of thinking about it because music is continuous, right? And there's also, and really, technically, there's an infinite number of points that we can put along this circle. Obviously, like I said earlier, we like to organize rhythm in either even chunks or even odd, but in bigger chunks. We're not going to get too granular about putting different points along the circle. Some drummers get really involved with that, different types of rhythms. But for general purposes, it's going to be one of these 2 categories, or I should say one of these 3 categories if we include this bottom one, which is the triplet, which I'll get to in a second. So anyway, so we try to keep things simple, actually. But it's one of those things that's easier said than done. So let me kind of erase a few things here. Now let's take a look at this one down here, which is a triplet. This has 3 equal parts, so as you can see, we're counting 1 and The and is kind of shifted, and it's only because we need a simple way of counting, in that using these 1 and or the 1 E and they're just easy to say and to sing as we count through it. So sometimes they have to be applied to different types of rhythm. So you may be asking, well, what rhythmic notation is this triplet thing down here? Now this is where it's confusing. It can be actually a few different things, but what we're going to do is we're going to use eighth notes as our starting point with this. And so each one of these little sections is going to be an eighth note triplet. Now it seems weird because we just said over here that this value is an eighth note. And same thing with that, there's two eighth notes. And so that makes no sense because for this section right here, that's only a part of an eighth note, because an eighth note would have to go all the way around to that point right here. Now, it's different with triplets because we notate it differently, and it looks like this. Here are three eighth notes beamed together, and when we need a triplet, we put this little bracket of 3 above it. And it's basically saying like cram 3 of these, or cram 3 eighth notes into the time of one revolution of the circle, or one beat in the case of music. So it's a little confusing because, like I said, we already thought of eighth notes as being this duration here, but now we're cramming 3 of them in the time of one beat. Now, I don't know this for sure, but it's kind of it's like a duct tape fixing this rhythm thing. To me, it really should have been a completely different symbol for this. So were they just like, oh, we'll just put a bracket above it, but it's literally a different rhythm. And it'd be nice to have a completely different symbol for that. That would make sense, but it just didn't work it just didn't work that way, whoever designed it. So there may be a reason. If you know, let me know. But anyway, it's kind of like fixing something kind of broken that's inherently broken. So at any rate, so you see triplets in a lot of things. You can see it in, let's say, quarter note triplets. You can see that. Looks like that. Using quarter notes. You can see them as 16th note triplets. Oops. Like that. So there's a lot of, you can put a triplet basically on top of any type of rhythmic value, or that little 3 symbol, and that becomes 3 in the time of whatever it is. All right. Don't worry about that too much just yet, because that's a little bit more advanced concept, the triplets. The main thing that we want to do is really think about the eighth notes, which is this one over here, and the 16th note, which is that one over there. So just kind of be aware of that. All right, so how does this all apply to the guitar? Well, I started kind of hitting on this a little bit before, which is the directions of our strum pattern, okay? So when we're dealing with eighth notes, like I said, we can do down, up, da, 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 da. So it would be like down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. 16th note, down, up, down, up, sorry, down, up, down, up, down would be the next beat. 1 E and 2 E and and it's important for you to count as you're learning rhythm, and it's also important for you to tap your foot. Your foot is tapping this top part here always. That's where it needs to be. It's really important to know where that top of that circle is, so you know where all these other little points are along the circle. Now, what if it was like a slow tempo? And let's just say you're playing quarter notes. You're always playing at the top of this on a slow tempo. It could be difficult to accurately place your rhythm on the top part of this point here if you're not filling in the blank, so to speak. So let me give you an example. So if we have a slow tempo like this, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's so much time between each one of those beats that we have to fill something in to help each one of those beats become more accurate. So an example of that would be counting something like 16th notes in between to help that beat stabilize. So it would sound like this: 1 E and 2 E and 3. Already, I'm sure you can tell, or you can feel that those downbeats are much stronger. Downbeats are the beats that I'm clapping are much stronger because I'm filling in my own mind, in my own count, these extra little points along the circle. And it's a real important concept because playing slow can be more difficult than playing fast. Whoops. All right. So hopefully that's starting to kind of settle in a little bit, what we're doing here. Okay, so some other tips. Metronome. So metronome, what I like to do is this. There's a couple things. One of which is to set my metronome, probably like you you would think, to clicking on quarter notes. So it would sound like this. All right, that's just 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me turn it up a little bit. 3, 4. All right. Now some metronomes like this one, and the one I'm using is one called Tempo, which I really like. I think it costs a couple of bucks. It wasn't much. So that's clicking in quarter notes. What I can do is now I can create these different divisions. So here is this, if you look on the screen here, if you look at this first one here, this 8th note, this guy right here, sounds like this. I can actually add, well, that's a big brush. I can actually add this part here as well as this one, and they're going to sound different. So it sounds, excuse me, sounds like this. So that could be good to practice. So you're going down, up, down, up, down, up to kind of play right along. So when you're, and I didn't mention this before, when you're practicing rhythm, pick a chord. Stay on that same chord, and you're mostly focusing on that right hand accuracy of the rhythm. Don't worry about changing chords. That's adding too much complexity. You have to focus on one thing at a time when you're learning music. So when you're focused on music, keep the left hand simple. Okay, the next one, I can also do 16th notes. Check it out. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and just like that. So there's, again, I have a different sound for this location here versus the ones in between here. And I like to hear, I want to be able to hear that, the beat there, in contrast with the other things. That'll help keep you kind of your bearings of where everything sits. I could do triplets. Check out this triplet one. 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and the nice thing with a lot of these metronomes, you can even change a lot of the different sounds. You can use, I don't know, bells, you can do sticks. There's a lot of different kind of tones that you can use that's going to better suit what you're doing. So here's where I would set things up. I would try anything from an 8th note, like that. Whoops. This thing allows you to accent certain things too. So I'll get into that later, but there we go. So I'll practice my 8th note strumming, 1 and 2 and 3 like that, or the 16th note. So those are the two ones that I use. I occasionally will practice just playing a quarter note, which is also good, to see if I can play the 8th notes along with this quarter note pulse. This again is where we're counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and just like that. So the three elements there: quarter notes, 8th notes, and 16th notes. And if you really want to challenge yourself, you can get into the triplets. All right, now triplets, let me just kind of make a side note to this. Triplets are difficult. Why? When we play, because they reverse every other beat. So we have down, up, down, up, down, up, and then it's back to down again. Now, that's if we're playing straight triplets all the way through. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and now, if we don't have to play every single one of them, then we can change things a little bit. Let me show you what I mean. If I don't have to play beat 1, I could play this is down and this one is up, and then maybe the next one is down here. So I could do something like that. So I'd come in here, down, up, down, 1 and 2, something like that. So there are some exceptions to this rule if we have to break up the rhythms and that kind of thing. So speaking of breaking up rhythms, let me segue into that for a second. So let me get rid of this stuff here. Let me go back to a blank sheet here.